Hi, everyone. I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, and theater. And today we're joined by the wonderful Jeanna de Waal, who is the current lead in Diana the Musical, but also more importantly, over the last few months has really created an amazing community online through Broadway weekends at home. And I wanted to kind of kick off by asking you a little bit about that transition, because this is a program that you founded and have been running for a while. But you found a way very, very quickly to kind of shift it into the online space. And I was interested in what those first few weeks looked like and just finding a platform to have available for people, and then how it journeyed from there to what it is now, which is, you know, a hugely cohesive program, multiple programs every day, different classes for different levels, and you're collaborating with a lot of musicals themselves now. So I was just really interested in kind of how that trajectory flowed out into what it's become at this point in quarantine.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Yeah, I was sort of in overdrive mode doing previews for the Diana on Broadway, which is the craziest schedule, and then it all sort of froze. And pretty much overnight, it went from the most hectic schedule to zero. And it was just luck. I think one, we were in that overdrive of something's got to happen. This is a moment. We were having to close all of our pop-ups. We had in-person theater camps scheduled all over Northern America. We'd been teaming up with actors in Broadway national tours to develop this like amazing content that sort of worked around the shows, and we're in the workshops, and so we sort of were closing all those down. I think there was quite a lot of adrenaline in that moment, sort of terrible adrenaline, but adrenaline nonetheless, both in terms of like the Diana was closing and what's happening to the world and the world's shutting down and what can we do. And I think that sort of put us in overdrive to sort of put this schedule together and connect theater lovers to theater performers who were all sort of free and available. And it started so organically just in a Facebook group, literally a Facebook group. And for many months, we were creating all the Zoom rooms individually, like hours and hours and hours and hours a week, creating Zoom rooms, making individual, we really were figuring it out. And Evie, who works on our team so closely, I remember her mom saying, whatever time of day I call you, whether it's 7 a.m. or 11 p.m., you are at your laptop and you need to take a step away. So, really, until we got our feet and thought, right, how can we like run this like a real business? It was a bit of a manic just few weeks of organizing classes and seeing people attend, which we were so thrilled about.
Yeah, but I also love that from the get-go, since you launched it, that you've always described it very specifically as kind of being like a camp versus being formal training and workshops, which really opens up the gamut of who can step into the world and who you're catering to in terms of people that really loved and have studied theater, but also people who are doing this just for the first time, who haven't had access to those opportunities and, you know, don't necessarily want to pursue it as a career, but are just interested in trying out a few classes. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you kind of map out the programming and create something that feels really cohesive, that all comes together, but thinking about the different audiences and the different participants that are going to potentially walk into the room for each of these classes.
Yeah, I mean, I think a huge difference is just removing the competitive nature of class. Being a professional actor definitely changes your relationship with theater classes and being an artist, and that, you know, that is what it is. When you want to pay your rent with your art, it changes the relationship. But when you don't have to pay your rent with your art, and I certainly grew up with this love and infatuation of theater because of it, there are so many joys to a lot of this work that is very personal and deeply impactful, and actually just about your own little discoveries and your own little meditation and your own little journey on things that, you know, it's a way of finding peace. And I've always had that relationship with theater classes, for lack of a better word. Yeah, it's been my, it's brought me so much.
Mm-hmm. But even within that, you know, the accessibility that comes for people who have wanted to pursue this but haven't had the options, perhaps, you know, it's not available where they live, and you also have a scholarship fund to broaden the socioeconomic background of everyone. Do you kind of see Broadway weekends as a place that, you know, has a small place to play in the industry when it opens back up, and really helping to open up the types of people who are able to access the industry?
Oh, I hope so. I mean, the huge positive outcome that has come for education from COVID is that people have got over this fear and this barrier of online learning. I think pre-COVID, you know, if you'd have said a tap class online, you would have thought this doesn't work, or I don't know. But literally everyone up until their granny knows how to use Zoom now and knows how to use Zoom really well. So there's this amazing access, not just in the arts, but, you know, we're talking about Broadway weekends in the arts now, but really in all subjects, cooking and you know, everything you can name it. People are so used to it, and there's such amazing access to educators around the world. And I think there's such a world of people being open to online programming once theatre opens up. You know, what is that at-home experience of the production that you then go and see with, you know, as a family event before dinner or whatever, you know?
Yeah. Was there more of a learning curve with everyone stepping into it and being on Zoom for the first time early on, and even just for the instructors in how to run classes? Because I was laughing when I heard you talking about the Diana opening night party where you were all on Zoom and no one knew how to mute themselves with 80 people.
Oh my gosh. I mean, our learning curve was huge. So much so that in September, we were offering free seminars to theatre teachers just to be like, look, this took us several weeks. Here's a flyer, here's a PDF, and if anyone wants it, just email us and we'll send it to you. But yeah, like, and Zoom as well, how they have caught up over these last few months has been unbelievable. And everything from like sound issues to, you know, everything else. And when you start to use your imagination, there's so much that's possible with online learning. Like there's breakout rooms, there's so many things that you literally couldn't do in person. And with online, you just have to see them as opportunities and embrace it for what it is, rather than trying to put an in-person experience online.
Yeah. On the flip side to that, you know, I think it's really interesting the way that it's not just classes, you've really focused on it being a community as well, and was really interested in how you approach that, because, you know, often so much of acting, and particularly when you were doing in-person workshops, you would always start with kind of like an ensemble collaboration together. And so how do you kind of recreate that in that setting and really create that connectivity that you need as performers?
So I think it was a bit of an accident. I don't think we realized we were going to create community, but I think the things that we did that created that community were, one, we opened classes 10 minutes before. Mm-hmm. So I think people arrived early and chatted and got to know each other. And then we had, you know, a central place of communication, the Facebook group. And we also try and help people with doing like multiple time zones and stuff like that to make their lives easy. But I think it's a sign of the times, and that people make friends having never met them. I mean, there's people on my core Broadway Weekends team who I've never met in my life, and we speak daily for multiple hours, and I feel like I know them. You know, I know them, and it's so weird in this age that you can have true relationships without ever meeting the person.
Yeah. And what does it look like in terms of the way that you work with the different instructors? Because, you know, there's a lot of people that you've pulled into this that you've worked with yourself through theatre. But at this point, you know, with the wide spectrum of people that you have, from choreographers to puppeteers, you know, monologue coaches, it's such a broad spectrum. So how do you kind of work with them each individually, just to make sure that each of the classes are going to be what you want for this brand?
Yeah. So I think the thing that's fantastic about theatre is, you know, same as if I was an accountant, we'd have a shared language that very quickly we can get to the crux of what we're speaking about. So in that way, it's very easy to have that shared language where we can discuss feedback and relay feedback, where they can share us an idea and we'll say, that's going to be too slow, or that's going to be too quick, or what about an end result, like something that people can perform, or, you know, so we've done enough of these series now that we know sort of the pace and sort of flow of it that will keep it both engaging and a bit exciting and nerve-wracking, all those sort of things. So I think Yeah.
I also wanted to ask you, you know, a little bit about the genesis when you were doing these in person. And I thought it was so interesting that, you know, was mentioning before that you would always start with an ensemble arrangement, and often, it wouldn't be a case of just reperforming the choreography from a show, that you would actually work with your collaborators to create completely new arrangements, which kind of really allowed everybody to walk in completely fresh. You know, nobody had the lead in coming in and already knowing that musical really well. And it was interesting kind of like why that was such an important specific decision. And then, you know, how that really taught you a lot as a performer as well, through going through that experience of figuring out what it was going to be for those classes.
Yeah, so the reason why, especially on our summer camps, we choose material that people aren't really going to know is so that you just have to sort of surrender and trust in the learning process of using your imagination. And I think, you know, at this point in my life, I've probably been in hundreds of hours of rehearsals, and I know what makes it fun, which is when there's this sort of group commitment to flesh out this idea and work together and explore it and all those sort of things. And when people have preconceived notions about what that show is, they tend to hold on to those. So we try to pick really obscure things for our summer camp. But we've definitely done one that required animal studies, which, you know, some people were not into. But, you know, it's a niche brand.
I also love how, though, you know, with going online, it's really opened up the possibility of what you can do, just because you're doing so much more every day as well. And, you know, you have things down to a whiz class, and everybody's talking about Jamie. So kind of how has that looked a little bit different, working with material from specific shows for people who are going to come in who already know it a little bit already?
Yeah, I mean, with those, we're doing, I mean, all sorts of workshops based on those shows. But yeah, there is definitely it will be very familiar to the show you're expecting. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. I also thought it was interesting that, you know, I was looking at things like monologue classes, and there's opportunities, if you can't necessarily get one of the available slots, that you could sign up to try and audit the class, and was really interested how that's a useful tool for people to step into as well, even if they're not participating themselves.
Yeah, so we actually sometimes have so many people like wanting to audit and actually struggle to say, come on, perform. So that's a question that we've not only asked ourselves, we've asked like our community, like, why do you guys love auditing so much? And I think it's because when you're watching someone else, you can see notes so clearly. And I also think it takes a little bit of time to build up the courage. You know, I don't think it's easy to sing on Zoom when you know there's people from all over the place looking at you, and it's definitely nerve-wracking. So I think, I think it's supporting the people you've seen in class, and I think it's sort of taking away notes that you can then go and practice in your private practice, and then building up the courage to give it a go in front of everyone.
Yeah. In terms of group performances and group singing on Zoom, how have you kind of approached that from a technical standpoint? I'm like genuinely interested because, you know, it's such a wonderful platform, but there's the challenge of, you know, sharing sound, sync issues, everybody's internet speed being a little bit different. So how do you kind of figure that out and approach that with a large group?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with one-on-one coaching, that's much easier. With group singing, how we've explored it is actually recording stuff that you're sent prior to the class, and then you practice the harmonizing with that track. But yes, you are correct. We cannot sing as a group at once. It's a mess. But you know, I think Zoom will catch up. You know, everyone is learning, and as I said, they've made huge improvements since we first started.
Yeah, one of the other classes that I wanted to ask you about, because I was really fascinated by it, and I feel like there's such a necessity for it, is the fact that you have classes and workshops for parents of young performers, because I think that's a space of the industry that's often hugely overlooked, and there's such a necessity for parents to be participants in their kids' careers and to be involved in what those decisions are going to be. And so I was interested in kind of like the way that you saw that gap within the industry and the need for that, and how you work with the parents to really kind of make them involved in their kids' careers in that way.
Yeah, so that one came about just because we were creating a couple of series for a theater high school. And so they sort of brought it up as one of the classes, could it be for the parents? And as soon as we thought about it and sort of established it, we were like, yes, and we've done this one a lot now. But yeah, I think it's terrifying for parents of actors who don't come from a arts career to know what's right and what's leading their kid down the wrong path and how they should think of it. So we have coaches, you know, who've coached at this point dozens of kids from initial talent to performing on Broadway. So and they give very, very candid answers, because why wouldn't they? And we think parents find it hugely helpful.
Mm-hmm. When you're working with schools, because you've started doing that more and more, kind of like, how do you kind of work to create something with them that's really cohesive, that's going to fit into like their overall curriculum that they have for students already? Because you're the person kind of like plugging and playing with them.
Yeah, so the first thing is establishing a goal. You know, is it that they are an arts high school and these are 17-year-olds about to audition for conservatoire training? You know, that's something very specific. And on the other extreme, it's, you know, a bunch of kids who like drama or, you know, are a bit nervous and they want a much more general workshop that will help them in their confidence, in their public speaking abilities, in their risk-taking abilities, in their willingness to be living in the unknown, and, you know, all those sort of things. So it's really like, okay, what's the goal? The kids want an agent, or the kids, you know, want to have better self-confidence, you know? So establishing the goal of the school and where the kids are at and their age group, and then sort of see where they're leaning, and we go from there, either with broad brushstrokes, talking about, is it dance, is it speaking, is it singing, to getting really, really nitty gritty and whittling it down until it's sort of even aligned with their curriculum and supportive of things they have coming up next year. It's a truly, we have liaisons that truly work one-on-one with the schools and make it right for them.
I also wanted to talk a little bit about one of the classes that you've said that you really enjoy teaching, which is acting through song, and kind of what do you see as the specific nuances of performing through song that really are very, very different to, you know, just dialogue driven performance, particularly within the theatre realm, that you want to pass along through that?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to share my techniques that I've sort of built up over the years. I describe it a bit like you have like a toolkit as an actor, right? So the real dream is that you sort of, the moment takes you, the divine happens, and you're like off into the world and you're completely living in it. But often when you're doing the show 8 times a week for 3 years or whatever, that doesn't happen. Or when you get a new audition, you don't know like how to begin, or, you know, like it's overwhelming sometimes. So sort of developing tools, and I have very specific tools that have worked for me and that I use repeatedly, and sharing those and playing with them, and really giving students the chance to sort of put new tools in their own toolkit so that they have these, you know, helpers when they're working on material.
Yeah, and one of those tools that you mentioned that I thought was really interesting was how you often start classes and breaking down a scene with like 3 specific questions about what was happening the moment before, who are you talking to, and what are you trying to do to your scene partner. And was interested in kind of, as a performer, how you developed those as the 3 questions that were the most useful for you to figure out how your performance was going to lead within a scene.
Yeah, how did I figure that out? Well, I think a lot of it is influence from my teachers, from my high school and from my college. I mean, I'm sure every drama teacher in the world is like, well, I know those things, you know, and like those, and then the other thing is finding things that work, and finding things that make you imagine and remind you to imagine, you know, and not just stand there, but remind you to imagine, where am I? What's the environment? Who am I talking to? Why am I saying it? You know, it's the most basic things, but sometimes you get nervous or you dive into the scene and you haven't given it any moment just to settle and take and sort of fill out your imagination of where you are.
Yeah, and your high school, if I'm correct, was actually, you know, an arts educational school in Hertfordshire. Yeah. And there was something that you talked about where you said that you really kind of found your voice as a comedic performer there. That was something that you didn't really think that you had before. And so I was really interested in the way that they helped you to develop and find that and kind of, you know, figure out what the specific rhythms and beats and pacing needed for comedic performances were in that space. Yeah,
did I say high school? Gosh, I don't even know if I think that. I don't know, but I think when I don't know if maybe I've said it differently in a different interview, but I would actually say I feel like I first thought, oh gosh, I can make people laugh, was in an audition. And sometimes auditions can be really freeing places because they're strangers and, you know, there's this sort of crazy energy in the room. So I think it was in a moment like that. But I think when I started to hone it, it's just trusting in that unknown, you know, and not trying to fix it, and really trusting in the awkward, or trusting in the, trusting that you know where that joke is going to land and how it's being read, and just listening to the audience, like truly listening to the audience. Yeah. Which I don't know how people do comedy on film. I have no idea.
And in terms of kind of the spaces and the rooms where you get the opportunity to learn, you know, you've mentioned a little bit as well about how there's so many opportunities as a performer, particularly somewhere like New York. You know, there's people are doing readings all the time. A friend's written a script and they need some people to gather in a room to hear what it's going to sound like. What are some of the ways that you found to be really useful in terms of spaces that you've gone into where you've really learned a lot from the people that are around you? Because it's not necessarily always about being in an audition room or having a role. There's so many opportunities to get education from people around you within art.
Oh yeah, in New York, there really is. I mean, it's on, well, it was at every turn, and it will come back. And you just have to get involved, read the blogs, read the websites, audition. I was, when I first moved to New York, so I had no agent or anything, and I was 22, and I would line up in Times Square every morning at like 4 or 5 and do the open calls and get your name down and meet people and just try and learn. You know, either work on mastering the skills you have even more if you want to get into the industry, or broaden it. And the other thing I would say is really start trying to think about if you can create content or write, because even if you're not ready to start sharing it, having those abilities at your fingertips will hopefully bring more jobs when the time is right and when you meet those people. But the more you can do, the more chance there is you work.
I also wanted to talk about the upcoming workshop that you're doing with the Prom, which is the first time that you've partnered with a Broadway musical for like a full weekend of events. And the cast and the choreography team and a lot of the creatives on it are working with it. And I was just really interested in how that collaboration came about and how you've worked with that team to figure out what all of these different classes are going to be and how you're really just going to pull everyone into that world over the space of a whole weekend.
Amazing. Yes. So how it worked was basically we got the email address of the lead producer and we emailed a very, please, can we have a Zoom meeting? We have an idea. We'd love to talk. And she very kindly and graciously said yes. So the first thing we spoke about was really sort of identifying the themes and the takeaways of the Prom and what that is and how that can be sort of interwoven in a bunch of different classes. And then we sort of took our expertise from Broadway Weekends at Home of sort of like the different theater workshops and sort of laying them out in a weekend where you're sort of welcomed in, you're sort of opened up, you start to work. There's and ending with a closing ceremony where people perform it and you get pulled out and you hear from Beth Level and Chris Sieber about what it's like to be on Broadway, and really sort of wrapping it up so that we hope, the film's coming out for the Prom in December and the show's coming out next year. When you see it, you really sort of get like, what were they trying to do with this show when they wrote it? Do you think they succeed? Have your own opinion. How did the actors approach the material? How would you approach the material? The musical theater art form is a crazy art form in terms of how much collaboration has to go on to even get it there. I've always found it fascinating.
Yeah, and kind of similar to most of your other programming, it is kind of open to all ages, but you're kind of suggesting that it's really focused and geared towards high school students specifically. And I was interested in kind of why you really wanted to program to them specifically for this weekend.
Right, so this is our first one that we've sort of narrowed the age bracket down. And really we wanted to do it because so many high schoolers have had so much canceled this year from shows to school trips, to all the sort of things. So a bit of an experiment, who knows if it works narrowing it down, or if we think, it was way better when the moms and dads were there as well. But yeah, we really just sort of wanted to give this an experiment and be like, especially the way these classes build community. We thought there was something really special to explore if we sort of aim this at high schoolers and have this group of kids have this experience together. So we will see.
Yeah. And then I also wanted to ask you about your own experience kind of continuing rehearsals and continuing to hone the show for Diana, since unfortunately it had to shut down before opening night, but you've been working towards not only the hopeful eventual reopening whenever Broadway comes back again, but also filming it for Netflix. And I was interested in kind of what that's been like working with all of the cast for a show that you had in a really good place, but the reason why it felt important to continue working on it over these last few months and what that's looked like in terms of doing that in a digital medium together.
Yeah, I mean, so we've continued working on it because there was suddenly an opportunity to improve it a little bit. I think there was definitely a moment in previews where I think people thought, oh, we'd love to work on this bit. There wasn't really the chance, and that's one thing the shutdown did bring was the opportunity to work on it. And then obviously when we're learning about that we're filming it for Netflix was just such a crazy turn, and it's been wonderful to work with everyone again, and it's been a wonderful opportunity to go back and do a role again. I mean, it's nice as a theater actor that you have to do all these different reincarnations because there's so many steps to getting it to wherever it's going. So it's such an opportunity to sort of go back, and I think each time you go back, you have a different goal, and you therefore approach it slightly differently, and you see it from a different perspective. And you know, a lot happens in 4 years personally as well, which always affects it. So it's just been the greatest gift just to keep going back and having another go.
Yeah, and in terms of rehearsing on Zoom, kind of how do you navigate and approach that? Because you're doing a rehearsal in an intimate digital medium, but for something that is a stage piece. So how do you kind of approach the way that you're giving that performance and making sure that it's going to read on the digital medium in the way that, you know, your scene partners and collaborators need it to, but still making sure that you're capturing what will be the ultimate performance on stage?
Yeah, well, for the Zoom rehearsal, I would say that we weren't trying to give stage performances. We were just truly working with the material. So I would talk to my scene partner how I'm talking to you right now, and I'm pretty animated, so I'm sure it was still pretty big. But so yeah, for Zoom we haven't, and I'm not sure if the answer to that is giving a stage performance. I mean, I'm certain when I'm coaching acting through song or auditioning for camera, I'm not saying give a huge stage performance. I think you have to adapt for whatever stage, you know, whatever it is. If it's this little box, then your performance kind of has to fill this little box.
Yeah. Has that been similar in terms of figuring out what the beats of your performances are going to be and what the nuances are for the filmed version versus the stage version? Because it's very different kind of performing to the huge energy of a theater to kind of having a camera focusing in much more closely on the performance that you're giving.
Yeah, it was, except that we really were capturing the theater version. So in that, you know, there was still an audience in my mind, even though there wasn't an audience, you know, so they're slightly different.
Yeah. And, you know, in terms of Broadway weekends at home, kind of overall looking at this over the last few months, what's been kind of the most meaningful aspect and feeling of community and collaboration that's come out of it for you personally?
Oh, the most meaningful aspect, bar none, is hearing from people. And whether that, you know, is, I mean, there's just so many personal stories that we have of people who have found us or love it, or, you know, and that really is the main reason that I do it. And it's personally been such a joy to have something to focus on this pandemic, and such a gift to have something to focus on that feels fulfilling and you know, feels like a great use of my time and a great use of my energy. And I'm just, yeah, so that is definitely the most fulfilling part, hearing from the people.
Yeah, that's so fantastic, because it sounds like it's definitely transcended to the people who are being part of the community and taking all these classes. And for everyone who's tuning into the talk, the prom weekend is taking place October 24th and 25th for West Coasters, and November 21st and 22nd for East Coasters. But obviously, if you like waking up early or starting the day a little bit later, you can obviously jump into either. And you can check out the full lineup of Broadway at-home classes online. And thank you so much, Jeanna. This was such a delightful conversation. And thank you for talking about this amazing community that you've created over these last few months.
Thank you. Thank you for your great questions. Thank you.